Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me, Professor Hindol Sengupta, Admiral Chauhan. It's such a pleasure to speak to such a distinguished audience. I was very fascinated about what you said in the first session about geopolitics as an amalgamation of all cultural, civilizational links. And I think I would like to begin there because India really enjoys a very unique cultural, historical, civilizational link with this entire area. You talk about Laos, Vietnam, whole of Southeast Asia. You see footprints of India, and I think when you talk about imagining the Bay of Bengal as a shared space, that's where I would like to draw our attention to in the first instance. The Bay of Bengal has also long been viewed as a region having two important but distinct characteristics. It is seen on the one hand as very vital for as a socio-economic hub for the neighboring countries, and we know that the countries bordering the bay, including India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Sri Lanka, etc., are heavily dependent on it for maritime trade, fishing, offshore resources such as oil and gas. And but on the other hand, we also see this region, the Bay of Bengal area, as a region which is seeing intense geopolitical rivalry, and no matter what happens to the various wars and what Minister Akbar talked about, the various seas, I think this is a reality which will stay with us for a long time, that the geopolitical rivalry of this region and the general desire of the smaller countries in the region not to get caught up in this, because they have other priorities, and this is not a competition or a contestation that they want to be involved in. So there is a lot of space for a country like India to shape its cooperation, collaboration, and its own vision of seeing the Bay of Bengal region as a shared regional commons, and pursue its objectives through the various mechanisms that already exist. India has articulated its position very well through the Sagar Doctrine, security and growth for all in the region. And since 2025, we have the Mahasagar Doctrine, which is the mutual and holistic advancement for security and growth across the regions. It expands on India's earlier Sagar vision to cover the entire global south, not just Indian Ocean region. And while Sagar focused on maritime security and development in the Indian Ocean, Mahasagar has definitely broadened the concept and scope to include trade, security, development, cooperation across the global south. Now, Mahasagar, by that definition, also transcends boundaries and fosters a broader global south coalition by including many countries in the region. This is to align their economic and security policies with India's vision. So this offers opportunities for smaller states to participate in high-value trade networks, non-traditional security frameworks, and in a sense also it's a great counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is purely strategic in nature and connecting the BRI projects everywhere. So the core pillar of Mahasagar can be identified as trade for development, security cooperation, and sustainable development. So India basically frames the Bay of Bengal as a zone of cooperation rather than conflict, and this vision is about transforming it into a cooperative maritime zone. So I'm not going to focus on the security aspect, which I'm sure the rest of the panel is going to cover in great detail. So with this in mind, India pursues its own, it wants to shape how BIMTEC moves forward. BIMTEC is a very important regional organization. It's, and India is a big player. We know, if you look at the history of BIMTEC, we'll know that, how India perceives BIMTEC, and the political push that India gives to BIMTEC gives it direction. There is the ASEAN, in India's vision of the Indo-Pacific, ASEAN is absolutely central. The IORA, and also let us not forget, when we talk about the Bay as a shared space, the bilateral and the regional initiatives that exist in this region in terms of the connectivity projects that India pursues with its neighbors, especially in the east. You take Bhutan, energy cooperation. BIMSTEC talks about energy networks, and it is actually happening as we speak. The region buys and sells electricity from each other. There are the connectivity projects. So India is pursuing all its options through regional organizations and through sub-regional organization and through its bilateral cooperation to pursue its vision of the Bay of Bengal as a shared space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was both succinct as well as full of content.
Thank you. Very lot of questions raised, and you've taken the risk of putting two Bengalis from the same part of the world in the same panel and to speak on the Bay of Bengal. I think that was a very risky decision. But just to add to your cheese story of Chandanagar, there is also another cheese from Bandil, Portuguese colony, which is very rare, very special cheese, which is available in only one shop in Newmarket, and it's a very interesting these cultural things that still exist. And just one point, I'll come to your question also, on what you mentioned, Professor Sengupta, that the whole thing you so passionately described about the Bay of Bengal. Let's consider today that just look at the northeastern states of India. They had centuries-old links with the Bay of Bengal. These were their trade routes, not for 20 years, not for 30 years, for centuries. The entire prosperity of the greater Bengal region before the British came and during, even predating the Mughal period was dependent on the access to Bay of Bengal. What did partition do? Cut them off completely from the Bay of Bengal. So I'll answer your last question first, which is that, India is committed to its own economic development. Obviously, your foreign policy is centered around your prosperity, economic development, Atmanirbharta as we call it. So there, Bay of Bengal, access to the Bay plays a very, very important role because we cannot move forward as a nation. We cannot have these larger aspirations unless we take everybody along, and we know that the northeastern states have fallen behind. So, India has used the various options, including the Bay of Bengal, the BIMSTEC, to improve connectivity in this region. Obviously, Northeast is a place where, some of India's most important foreign policy objectives, neighborhood first, act east, everything sort of, converges there. And if you look at, in fact, the government of Assam actually has a department called Act East Department, and the government of Assam is very active on this as they feel that they are the real gateway to ASEAN, to this, vibrant, economically developed region of ASEAN. So in a way, the mandates of BIMSTEC and ASEAN can be looked at together because it's a very, very broad canvas. I will just take, say, perhaps, what India has, the responsibility that India has in BIMSTEC, which is counter-terrorism, transnational crimes, disaster management, energy security. So these are areas where India can do a lot, and in the BIMSTEC, because of India's size, India's prominence in the region, naturally the other countries look up to India for leadership. And we all know that when India did the 2016 outreach, with the BIMSTEC countries, that was a very big turning point in how BIMSTEC moved forward from there. So it's true that, while BIMSTEC will be completing 30 years next year, and presently the presidency is with, the chairmanship is with Bangladesh, and I think if you see the alphabetic order, probably it will go to Bhutan after that. And but even though it's a very low profile organization, little is known about it outside BIMSTEC, it has done phenomenal work. It is now a legal organization. It has its own charter. It has the master plan on connectivity. I see there is a session on master plan and connectivity. Can you imagine the entire regional countries have actually agreed to a master plan, and it's an evolving document. It's not written in stone. Every country can give their own little projects to it later. And this is something which can, completely change the economics of that region, increase per capita incomes, increase the livelihoods, improve the livelihoods of the people, and bring the connectivity, because we all know South Asia is the least connected area in the world. While, ASEAN, intra-ASEAN trade is about 30%. Intra-South Asia trade is barely 5%. Despite India giving SAFTA, facilities to a lot of our neighbors. So altogether, I think in terms of the security concerns are definitely there, but the economics of what we are trying to do, that India is trying to do through the BIMTEC mechanism and through its Act East policy with ASEAN, where it overlaps in the Kaladan multimodal project, the India, Myanmar, Thailand, the trilateral highway, and our proposal to extend the highway up to Vietnam and Laos. These are all game changers, and the growth of the upcoming reports.
Yeah, thank you. And would you like to take off from where not the last one, not the difference between going to London and going elsewhere, but all the issues about how do we manage to move this culture thing? How do we amalgamate these things? Why is it necessary for us to discuss security in these grim tones and culture in these joyous tones? Why can't we have a conversation on both?
I think we certainly can, and we should have, because as you yourself mentioned in the first session, that there is an amalgamation of all of this, and it's very obvious what the connects are. But I would like to just mention, because Professor Sengupta mentioned about, we know so little about what's going on around us. We have to recognize that, we live in a social media world. Here people are consuming information from reels and from 70-worded tweets and, from the X. You cannot reduce 1,000 years of history and, nuanced foreign policy aspects into those 70 words and still communicate a coherent message. So what governments do, I myself was in public diplomacy in the Ministry of External Affairs, and it was, social media was just about coming up, and I think we very successfully used social media. But you have to see social media along with the fact that there is a lot more interest in foreign policy amongst the common people. Certainly the middle classes, because everybody is, relative, somebody or the other is abroad, somebody is studying abroad, so you are always interested in what's going on. And also foreign policy has become much more an aspect of a domestic discourse. It's very much a part of domestic discourse. So no, but given the interest, there is no patience to actually go into every foreign policy decision has behind it years of historical, communication, years of history, years of nuancing. That is very difficult to communicate. I accept that, it is really, really difficult to communicate. But I think all governments can work with stakeholders and do a better job of it. Because here stakeholder, you did mention about South Block. Having been a resident there for many years, I have to say that, even though it is not often visible, but stakeholder, in today's world, you cannot take policy decisions without stakeholder involvement. After all, if you do and say investment agreement with a foreign government, who are you doing it for? For investors, for business people. So you can only create the enabling environment. It is the business people who have to take advantage of it. So I think, I don't know if I was explaining.
Yes, absolutely.